Hi everyone, welcome to Powering AI Capabilities with API Management and OpenAI API tutorial. In this video, we'll explore the benefits of integrating Apache APISIX with OpenAI API. My name is Babur and I am a developer advocate for Apache APISIX. In this tutorial, you can learn how you can use Apache APISIX to create more scalable, performant, and secure AI integration. From proxy caching to security features, we'll cover everything you need to know to get started with Apache APISIX and OpenAI API integration. And at the end, I will show you a small demo on how to configure primary edge functionalities for your new API endpoint. API, just three-letter acronym for Application Programming Interface. By now, we are all familiar with this term because we are living in an increasingly API-centric world. Every service we use today either uses API or it's an API itself. And even ChatGPT uses API to retrieve all the generated models by artificial intelligence using, let's say, OpenAI API. OpenAI API makes available powerful AI models for us developers through its API. As a ChatGPT, one example, what we call sometimes GPT plus 3, also AI models available through the OpenAI API. It's particularly well suited for use cases that require natural language processing and text generation capabilities. For example, it can be used to generate text responses in a chatbot or provide a text completion suggestions or code completion. Also, it helps you with your image generation. You can generate images from text, or you can create the copy of the images or different variation of images of existing image. By using API Gateway with OpenAI API, you can easily create and deploy scalable, secure, and high-performance API that access the OpenAI models. This will allow you to incorporate the power of OpenAI into your applications and provide a great experience for your users. There are several benefits of using Apache APISIX with OpenAI API, such as scalability, security, performance, observability, and of course flexibility, where it provides a flexible way to manage and control the access to the OpenAI API, allowing you to customize and configure your integration as needed. Here are several Apache APISIX plugins that can be used to enhance the integration with the OpenAI API. Some of the plugins you can use, like rate limiting, to limit the number of requests of API requests, or prevent your APIs from overuse. Or you can apply authentication to secure access to your API by implementing authentication and authorization mechanisms. Also, you can use it as a traffic control plugin to control the whole flow of your API traffic, or use observability plugins to monitor and log API requests and responses and provide visibility into the usage. Also, you can use caching plugin to cache API responses. It definitely reduces the number of API requests and improves the performance by reducing the cost of using directly OpenAI API. Also, you can use transformation plugins. It can help you to modify API requests and responses, transforming, let's say, from one data format to another. Like if you're receiving a response from the JSON from OpenAI API, you can use and convert it to gRPC protocol. With enough theoretical knowledge in mind, now we can jump into a practical session. For this demo, I prepared already GitHub repo. You can find it on my GitHub repository. It's called APISIX OpenAI API. There you can find the Docker sample example for running APISIX. There is also, as you can see, Docker compose YAML file where it can bring some necessary containers for Grafana, Prometheus, APISIX, and etcd, and along with the APISIX dashboard. You can also read the blog post version of this demo tutorial under APISIX.ai blog, and here you can see all the demo examples that I'm going to demonstrate, but only in written format. You just clone the project and then open this project in your favorite editor. In my case, I'm using Visual Studio Code, and the project folder I open it here, and with all the folder accessible And also you can find all the command examples that we are using today in this command.sh file. And then I need to open my terminal and run docker compose up to run APISIX together with all the other containers. I will do docker compose up, and then it will run a couple of containers. If you are using Windows machine and Docker desktop installed on your machine, you can even see some of the containers related to the APISIX OpenAI API report up and running. Once you install the APISIX, next things we need to do, we should go to openai.com and then create there our personal account. In my case, I have my account here, and then from there you can view your existing API keys. If you have a pretty new the account, you need to generate one new secret, because we will use this API key to access OpenAI API. For more information, you can go to OpenAI documentation and learn more about some of the guides for text completion, or maybe you can read some API references like how to authenticate and how to request from organization, or how to request specific API endpoints. I assume that you have already you open the account, and then you have the API key, and now I can jump back to the commands.sh file, and you need to insert your API key into the header of authorization with a bearer. You need to specify the API key. Typical request you can do against OpenAI API completion endpoint. For example, we are calling this endpoint with curl command, and we are sending in a header like content type, and we are sending the authorization as a header, and we are sending some test, the post request against a completion endpoint to check if it's responding correctly. Let's test first if we can collect some data from OpenAI API. And then I can just copy and paste this example with my correct API key into the terminal and run this curl command, and after a couple of milliseconds you will get a response from OpenAI API with some kind of information like if you're testing if it's test case, and it's responding yes, indeed it's a test case. Now we are ready with setup, and next steps we can start with integrating OpenAI API with Apache APISIX. In this integration example, Apache APISIX is used to create a simple API gateway that accesses OpenAI API and manages the traffic by creating a route upstream and enabling some plugins. And we are going to interact with OpenAI API completion endpoint, as you have seen in the previous step, and to create a product description generator. Let's say it generates a product description when we provide some kind of product name. For example, let's give me a brief product description for Apple 13 Pro. It should give a product description efficiently and accurately with a couple of settings that we also provide in our post requests. And our API gateway should also route this kind of post request directly to completions endpoint. In step number 1, we need to create upstream for our OpenAI API domain. As you can see, this is a curl command example. Of course, you can use Postman to do so, or you can use the Apache APISIX the dashboard. This is a sample what it does. Just we are providing the upstream object name and description, and we are choosing the, like round robin the matching algorithm, and we are accessing the OpenAI API via secure HTTPS connection, and we have only a single node, that is api.openai.com, and we are sending this request to the admin API of Apache APISIX. And now if we just copy and paste this curl command into terminal, it will create our first upstream object, and it says we go here. Admin API is responding successful, and now we have first upstream, and next you need to create a new plugin configuration the same way that we are interacting with admin API. In this case, we will create a plugin config object. Plugin config object consists of many plugins, one or multiple plugins you can specify. In our case, now a single plugin, which is proxy rewrite. That's a built-in plugin in API 6. What we are saying that every time whenever the request is coming, we should rewrite the URI of this request to /v1/completion, which is OpenAI API completion endpoint, and we are also specifying the host, and we also appending, as you can see, the headers like authorization and content tab, because headers, these headers is needed as we showed in the previous steps, like how we requested the OpenAI completion endpoint. So let's create our first new plugin configuration, and in the same terminal window, and if I press enter and run this curl command, it says okay, everything is fine and the plugin config is created. And next, the third step to start this integration, we need to set up a route for the completion endpoint with upstream ID and plugin config ID we created until now. Now what we do, we again try to access admin API and we add one more route object. We provide name, description, and we say every post request that matches this URI, OpenAI/pro description, should be forwarded to the upstream. In our case, upstream is OpenAI API completion endpoint, and it should use this plugin. In our case, proxy rewrite plugin. So let's go ahead and run this curl command to create the first route. Here we go, and as you can see, the admin API is saying okay, and now we created the upstream plugin and we configured the route. Now it's time to test with another curl request if the plugin configuration is working as we expected. To do so, we just run similar curl command, but in this case, as you can see, we update the domain that we are using, our API gateway domain, and then we are already also saying another path different than a completion endpoint. But when we do this curl command, API gateway should forward our request to the OpenAI API completion endpoint, but we are also sending in the post request the same body that we are asking to write some product description. Let's get this curl command and put onto the terminal to see if we can get some response from OpenAI API completion endpoint. It takes some time to get this response, and here we go. As you can see, we got HTTP OK response, and the AI provided for us the description for our product. Let's say here, as you can see, some description came back by explaining what is the April 13 Pro is about. So everything is working fine up to now. Up to now, we have integration with API Gateway and OpenAI API that every request can go through the API Gateway, and we have the control, right? And up to now, our API Gateway product description endpoint is public and accessible by unauthorized users. Although the communication between API 6 and OpenAI API is secured with our API key in the header. In this section, now we'll enable the authentication feature. This allows unauthorized requests to our API. To do so, we need to create the new consumer for our endpoint and enable also the basic authentication plugin for our existing plugin configuration, so that only allowed user can access them. Of course, you can use other plugins, authentication plugins like a key authentication plugin or JWT or token based and so on. Now let's create our first consumer in the same way how we are accessing admin API. and I can just this curl command, and here we go. Our the consumer is over there with its credentials like username and password. You can put any password stronger. And then I can now update my existing plugin configuration. As we can see, we are updating. We had a proxy rewrite information, and now I'm appending one more plugin for the same plugin config, the object, JSON object, and to also enable basic authentication. Let's run this curl command, and it should update now a plugin list. There you go. Now the plugin is updated. After we update the plugin list, if we try to access our API without providing any credentials, I should definitely get unauthorized error. Let me open a new terminal here and paste the same curl command we did against / product description, and here we go. As you can see, API gateway, without forwarding our request to OpenAI API, immediately the returning exception with a custom message like we are missing authorization in request. However, if you provide all username and password in the basic authentication, and then the physical command, which this request should be allowed to go further down to OpenAI API. So here we go. Now we got a response once again from OpenAI API, and we have the product description briefly returned back. In this section, let's try to protect our product description endpoint from abuse by applying like some sort of throttling policy. In Apache APISIX gateway, we can apply rate limiting policies to restrict the number of incoming calls to our API. And to do so, we can apply rate limiting policy with limit count plugin, and append again to this plugin to our existing plugin config list. What we are saying here in this limit count configuration object, we are limiting number of API calls only by 2 every 60 seconds per our API consumer. It means we cannot make a request more than 2 times every 1 minute. So to enable this plugin, we need to also bring this curl command to our terminal and pass it here, and everything is good. Now if I press enter, API gateway says okay, the request is accepted. Next, if I try to test and also request the gateway with the credentials of user or my API consumer, I cannot do more than 2 times request against the API gateway over 60 seconds. Now I did my first request and second request also allowed to pass, but when I do third time, here you see I got a forbidden error with some kind of error message that we are requesting too frequently, maybe try again. And also, as you can see, like when we did 2 times the requests in the above, like it also returns in the header rate limiting the numbers, like how many rate limit we've set and how many is remaining. After we do 1 or 2 times, it's counting. When it's reached remaining is reached the limit and it's equal to the limit, we are getting the too frequent error message. Now let me show you 3 plugins we use today for our demo. If you navigate to Apache APISIX official documentation and open the API Big Gateway docs and the plugin section, you can find subcategories like authentication, transformation. For example, we use transformation response rewrite plugin to rewrite our API URIs and passes, and also we use it today the traffic control limit count plugin for enabling the rate limiting capabilities, and also we use it basic authentication from the authentication category of these plugins. you can give a try and test maybe other plugins, maybe use these plugins together to build some kind of more advanced scenarios.